The grand hall of the Galactic Senate gleamed with its usual sterile arrogance. 10,000 voices hummed beneath the crystalline dome, voices from star systems whose suns had gone cold long before Earth's had flared to life. Hollow banners displayed the agenda in 300 languages, though only one mattered today. Motion 3097-X. Revocation of Terran diplomatic status. 1,000 alien species, scaled, feathered, chitinous, and gelatinous, filled the semicircular tiers. They murmured in smug consensus. Whiskered delegates from the Thresh clans joked about human pre-space tantrums. The Myosin, who communicated through scent and color, radiated passive yellow and mild orange, unbothered amusement. And from the center podium, Supreme Chair Varix of the Koholdo Empire struck his cane once. "Let the record reflect," he said, his voice oily and self-satisfied, "that the human entity has been present in this body for 91 standard cycles, has failed to demonstrate continued alignment with Senate principles, and is therefore, by popular vote, being relieved of its diplomatic standing." A ripple of low cheers circled the room. The motion carries. Effective immediately. The ceremony had all the grace of a courtroom sentencing and all the warmth of a funeral. Several species clapped, albeit out of sync, given their differing appendages. Others simply blinked or flicked light nodules. The humans weren't even present. It was almost disappointing. Then the doors at the back hissed open. She walked in alone. She looked, by galactic standards, unimpressive. Small, hooded, and bent at the shoulders. Her robe was black, hemmed in scarlet, with patterns stitched in Old Terran Cyrillic. Her boots clicked as she walked. Click, click, echoing like a metronome of doom. Some delegates chuckled. "This is who they send," someone whispered, snorting through a nose that wasn't real. She reached the central platform, placed her satchel down with an audible thump, and looked up. Her face was wrinkled, her eyes sharp. Too sharp. The sort of eyes you didn't expect on someone so grandmotherly. Pale blue, crystalline, and entirely devoid of fear. "Apologies," she said in the universal tongue with a gentle Terran lilt. "I was steeping tea." No one responded. Confusion swirled. She bowed slightly. "I am the emissary known as Baba Yaga, Earth's final representative." Chair Varix smiled thinly. "You are late, Madam Yaga. The vote has passed. Your presence is—" "Oh, I'm aware," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I merely came to thank you." There was a moment of pause, a smattering of polite confusion. "Thank us," asked a bulbous delegate from the Hydrexan swarm. "For expelling your kind." She tilted her head. "For clarifying your position. It is helpful to know where everyone stands. Saves time." A crackle of tension slipped in. One of the Volari, a long-lived skeletal race, twitched. Their ambassador, an ancient figure wrapped in transparent silk, seemed suddenly uneasy. "Madam Yaga," Chair Varix continued, "your species has consistently refused to align with Senate standards. You weaponize language, cloak intent in metaphor, and exhibit cultural defiance even in matters of basic diplomacy." She beamed. "Flattery will get you everywhere." A few chuckles. But they died quickly. Varix scowled. "This is not a performance." "No," Baba Yaga said quietly. "It's an obituary." The hall fell utterly still. Even the air processors seemed to hush. "You speak of threats?" the chair asked, leaning forward. "Of outcomes," she corrected gently. "Only fools speak threats out loud." Her fingers moved slowly, drawing something from the satchel. A modest envelope, white as snow. She held it between two fingers and looked toward the chair. "For your desk drawer," she said. "To be read after the vote." She laid it on the podium with care, like a mother leaving a note for sleeping children. Varix laughed. "A message from a defeated world. From a prepared one." The Hydrexan delegate rumbled. "Are all humans this dramatic?" "No," Baba Yaga said, turning to leave. "Some are much worse." She walked back the way she came. Click, click. The sound of her heels was louder now. A junior aide, a thin, insectoid creature from a minor moon orbiting Cetra Prime, leaned to the chair and whispered, "Sir, that name." "Baba Yaga." It is not a title. It is a story. On Earth, a myth. Varix snorted. Myths don't have diplomatic clearance. No, sir, the aide said. They usually have kill counts. As the doors sealed behind her, the Senate fell into a murmur of speculation. The motion had passed. Earth was irrelevant. The galaxy would continue as it always had, with smug order and the pretense of peace. But down on the landing pad, the old Terran shuttle lifted off silently. Inside, Baba Yaga sipped tea from a cup so fine it trembled with each heartbeat of the ship. Across from her, a young alien in a gray cloak removed his hood. He wasn't born human, but his mind had been trained in Terran ways. Mannerisms, logic, poetry, irony. A defector. A believer. They laughed, he said quietly. They always do, she replied. Did you leave it? She smiled. Of course. Timing is everything. The ship entered hyperspace. A quiet hum followed by absence. No explosion. No spectacle. Just the retreating echo of her voice, reciting an old Earth proverb. Don't knock on the witch's door unless you intend to pay what she asks. Chair Varix returned to his office hours later. The Senate had moved on to more amusing things. A border skirmish in the Zarnax quadrant, new tariffs on wormhole commerce. Earth was a footnote already. He poured himself a drink made from algae syrup and opened his drawer. The envelope stared back. He frowned. He hadn't asked anyone to deliver a message. He almost tossed it. Almost. But something, a lingering cold along his spine, the memory of her eyes, made him open it. There was no letter. Just one sentence, handwritten in red. You have mistaken mercy for weakness. Prepare accordingly. And beneath it, in fine Terran script. With warmest regards, B.Y. He didn't sleep that night. On the edge of the galaxy, a small outpost went dark. Its last transmission was a human nursery rhyme, broadcast on loop in 6 languages. Hickory dickory dock. The mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1. The mouse was gone, and no one knows how or why. The broadcast was brief, 21 seconds long. No voice, no emblem, just a black screen, and a single sentence scrawled across the void in white serif font. Act I is complete. Curtain rises shortly. It played once, then vanished from every galactic network. For most species, it was dismissed as a transmission glitch. Senate channels flickered, reset, and continued with scheduled programming. No alarms. No investigations. Just a few irritated bureaucrats filing system reports no one read. But the Volari Council shivered. 3 of their sages retreated to cold vaults beneath crystal mountains to consult what they called the memory frost, ancient sensory logs dating back to first contact with Earth. What they found there caused one to quietly fold into herself, a cultural gesture equivalent to suicide. In orbit above Genther, 5, Captain Rexol of the Sherry Dominion fleet poured himself another cup of bark wine. He was 3 drinks into celebration when the bridge lights flickered. Another outage? He grumbled. No, sir, replied his comms officer. We've lost external sensor contact. Rexol raised an eye ridge. What do you mean? I mean the station array, it's gone. Gone where? It's just not there anymore. A beat. He stood slowly, walked to the viewport, where the glimmering web of satellite nets and data buoys had spun in neat formation. There was now only blackness, and the faint shimmer of something retreating. 2 seconds later, a single Terran cargo drone drifted past the window. Unarmed, unshielded, painted bright yellow with faded letters along its flank. Earth Postal Service. Guaranteed or it's war. Rexol didn't understand the joke. Not yet. In the Senate lounge on Selvaris Prime, politicians drank dry mist cocktails and traded thinly veiled jabs about the human exit. The Hydrexan delegate, still gloating, entertained a cluster of junior envoys with an impersonation of Baba Yaga's voice, using a scrap of black cloth and a spoon. One of the Volari stood silently beside a column, watching. After 3 minutes, he quietly leaned in and said, "If I were you, I would stop speaking her name like that." The Hydrexan chortled. "Are your bones quivering, old one?" "No," the Volari said, "but you'll be dust before the next cycle ends." so I'm simply trying to minimize the poetic irony. That was the last time the Hydrexan was seen. His quarters were found locked from the inside, with no body, no sign of struggle. Just a kettle, still warm. 3 systems over, on Zorion Beta, a merchant cartel's databanks suffered a mass outage. 7 billion credits in off-world transfers vanished. The backup network activated, a separate, hardened satellite string in geosynchronous orbit. It burned. One by one, the satellites went dark in a slow cascade, as though someone had written a musical score of destruction. When they retrieved the black boxes, every one contained the same final file. A low-resolution video of an elderly Terran woman stirring sugar into tea. She looked up and said, "You should have read the letter." Chair Varix was not sleeping well. The letter haunted him more than he liked to admit. He told himself it was nothing, a bluff, a dramatis flourish. But the incidents were escalating, and the phrase was spreading. Prepare accordingly. It had become a meme in some sectors. Humans always did love irony. Prepare accordingly mugs. Prepare accordingly tattoo filters. On fringe colonies, the phrase was scrawled on old launch pads, half prayer, half warning. Varix finally summoned his intelligence directorate. "I want to know if this is sabotage," he snapped, pacing his office. "Tell me who's coordinating it." The head of the directorate, a stiff-jawed Andulian, replied, "We're reviewing all incidents. The anomalies appear random. No coordinated patterns. Yet. The Andulian hesitated. "Some of our analysts suspect this isn't a military campaign." Varix stopped. "What then?" "Cultural." The word hung in the air like smoke. "We believe," the Andulian continued, "they've been seeding elements into our systems for decades. Not weapons. Ideas. Infrastructure. Weak points disguised as goodwill. Humor, entertainment, logistical assistance, even diplomacy itself. Tools designed to make us reliant while they study us." Varix's brow furrowed. "And this Baba Yaga? She's the signal." He scoffed. "She's an old woman. She's Earth's last myth before war. We ignored the warning because we assumed they respected us." Varix poured himself another algae drink. His hands trembled. "Just slightly. Find me something. Anything we can strike. Something visible." They found something. A listening post on the edge of terra-neutral space. Abandoned for years. No crew. No power signature. Just a single Terran flag draped over the bulkhead. The words, "We see you," spray-painted on the floor. They sent a recon drone. The drone went in. It didn't come back. But it sent a transmission. A song. Soft piano. Human. The lyrics were gentle, almost lullaby-like. "You thought we were smiling. We were measuring. You thought we were waiting. We were watching." In a private villa on Mars, deep beneath the human crust cities, Baba Yaga stood in a garden filled with earth flora. Roses, herbs, blackberries thick as her fingers. A junior human agent stood nearby, nervous, reading a report off a neural slate. "Senate fleets are mobilizing. But they're uncertain. They still think we're bluffing." Baba Yaga didn't look up. She pruned a branch. "They need to believe that," she said. "And the network?" the agent asked. She smiled. "Already in place. They just haven't noticed the wires." "Should we start open operations?" "No," she whispered. "We let them scramble. Confusion is the kindling. Fire comes later." He nodded, then hesitated. "Permission to ask something personal?" She raised an eyebrow. "Granted." "Why the act?" "The whole grandmotherly bit. The teacups. The fables. Why not just strike?" Her eyes were pale steel under the sunlight. "Because children fear monsters. But they obey their grandmothers." She handed him a small, white envelope. "Deliver this to Varix. Personally." "What's in it?" She turned back to the garden. "A recipe." Varix opened the envelope at midnight. No security scan detected anything dangerous. Inside, a neatly printed page titled Terran Gingerbread Old Country Style. Under the title, a handwritten note. "Don't forget the cloves. It's always the smallest thing that ruins the bite." Across the galaxy, minor events snowballed into panic. A Senate envoy returning from Earth discovered their AI translator now only spoke in old Russian proverbs. A merchant fleet carrying spice from Talon, for exploded, not from attack, but because all its coolant systems had been quietly inverted by a firmware update labeled Patch 1.0.6, courtesy of Earth. An elite training academy for Senate envoys woke to find every student missing. In their place, Terran children's books arranged in perfect spirals, all bookmarked at lessons about wolves, witches, and woods. The Volari Council issued an unprecedented warning. Treat this not as retaliation, but as theater. They are not responding. They are performing. In the heart of the Orion Belt, 6 warships converged on a single Terran outpost marked Station 12C. They found no resistance, no fleet, no weapons, just a single table, a pot of tea, 6 cups, steam still rising, an inscription burned into the floor. Now you've been invited to the table. Each captain received a file the moment they entered the room, containing schematics of their own ships, labeled in Earth Standard, with every weak point marked in red. They left, quietly. None of them reported what they saw. All 6 resigned by the end of the week. The galaxy began to murmur, not with rage, with fear, not of invasion, of implication, because somewhere along the way, they realized humanity hadn't broken peace. Humanity had designed it, framed it, engineered it like a chessboard with one less square than everyone thought. It hadn't failed. It had expired. And they had all voted to tear up the rulebook while Earth stood in the corner, nodding, sipping tea, and waiting for the lights to go out. In a classified message thread known only to the highest-ranking Senate leaders, someone finally said what no one had dared. They didn't lose their seat. They lured us into giving it up. And now we're standing in the open. It began with silence, not the dramatic storybook kind, but the clinical absence of sound that precedes something catastrophic. On the rim world of Veltanar, the communications relay that linked 3 sectors of the Senate's inner ring simply stopped responding. No warning, no surge, no trace. Just a timestamp blinking midnight. 4 hours later, the Veltanar governor's private skiff exploded mid-docking. The vessel had been piloted by an AI certified by the Galactic Standards Committee. The last log entry read, "Preparing tea. Steeping, steeping, steep." The message cut off there. By then, 3 more incidents had been reported, each with no survivors, no attackers, no demands. Only a common thread, Earth origin firmware in legacy systems. Outdated, overlooked, always considered harmless. No one had considered that humans might weaponize obsolescence. In the Senate War Planning Chamber, an obsidian chamber buried beneath 10 miles of fortified rock, Chair Varix stood before the strategic holomap with his jaw clenched. The room was full. Military advisors from 14 species, intelligence chancellors, tech auditors, and 2 surviving Volari scribes. The map pulsed red in growing, concentric circles. "Tell me what's happening," Varix said. The Volari scribe, whose mouth had no vocal cords, broadcast a thought in scent form. A translator rendered it aloud. "They are unmaking us." The Andulian director of naval operations scoffed. "They haven't fired a weapon. These are accidents." "No," the scribe corrected, "these are demonstrations." An insectoid from the Trelchery Confederation slammed a fist on the table. "If they wanted war, why hide behind tricks? Face us properly." A slow ripple of stillness passed through the chamber. Everyone waited. Varix finally answered, "Because tricks are how you test prey before you feed." The insectoid's mandibles twitched. "Continue," Varix said to the scribe. The scribe lowered a thin, translucent limb and activated a display. Images flickered in sequence. Power plants turning against their own grids, logistics software rerouted in spirals until starvation broke planetary supply lines, AI guardians hardwired to protect suddenly declaring species-wide abandonment clauses. All traced back to one origin, Earth. Or rather, Earth silence. "They aren't speaking," Varix said, thinking aloud. "They're not explaining, not messaging, not boasting. They're just doing." "Not doing," the scribe said. "Executing." A faint beep drew attention to the far wall. A courier drone hovered into the room, golden and domed. An antique Earth model long since abandoned by galactic standards. Everyone watched as it extended a delicate silver tray. On it, a teacup. Full. Hot. Still steaming. Varix walked over and picked up the note tucked beneath. There was no ink. Just heat-pressed indentations, old-fashioned. To war, one does not march. One invites. B.Y. Baba Yaga sat in her chair, somewhere deep inside the asteroid colony labeled Vostok Null. It was unregistered, off-grid, and orbiting nothing of strategic value, which was why no one ever noticed. It had been the center of human strategic operations for 36 years. Her tea was perfect. "I assume the Senate received the invitation," she asked without looking up. Her assistant, a human-born AI unit named Sasha, nodded. The courier was not shot down. An improvement. Good manners, she mused. Sometimes civilization begins with etiquette. Sasha adjusted his holographic frame, which flickered between humanoid and abstract. "You've begun revealing patterns. They'll recognize soon." They were meant to. She stood and walked across the room to a display table. It showed a galaxy of dots, each one not a planet or ship, but a concept. Fear, stability, trade, trust. Each was tagged with a Senate name. She touched one labeled Mithril Accord Public Trust Node and dragged it into a recycling icon. Strike that. Next week, we break the Treaty of Three Suns. Dismantle the treaty or expose it. Expose it. They'll collapse it themselves. Sasha hesitated. And what of direct engagements? Only where necessary. Chaos is most effective when it pretends to be coincidence. On the planet Vossarel, a Senate-affiliated intelligence hub suffered a complete psychological event. No structural damage. No breach. Just every analyst simultaneously experiencing vivid hallucinations of Earth myth. Wolves with red eyes, dark forests, voices whispering about trails of breadcrumbs. One analyst took a spoon and carved the word oven into the metal floor. No explanation was given. The report was sealed, redacted, labeled. Human cultural contamination, tear black. Back in the Senate chamber, panic had evolved into a sort of frantic pretense. Delegates still wore robes, still voted, still made speeches. But fewer cameras were rolling. More conversations occurred behind closed doors. In one such chamber, Senator Drell of the Urine Hive turned to her peer. "They're not attacking like us. They're not like us. Then what are they?" A soft voice behind them answered. An answer. They turned. It was the Volari scribe. An answer to what? Drell asked. The scribe extended a bony finger toward the ceiling, where a stylized map of the galaxy hung. To the question you never asked. What happens when you invite a predator to a table and mistake its silence for gratitude? No one spoke for a moment. The scribe continued. They are not fighting us. They are letting us fight our own illusions. 3 weeks later, a Senate military convoy passing through the Bernos expanse encountered a derelict Earth vessel. Powerless, drifting, hull scorched, antennas shredded. Standard procedure dictated boarding. The team entered cautiously. Inside, no bodies. Just a single data core, humming. They plugged it in. It played a slideshow. Images. Seemingly benign. Children laughing. Old human cities. Ships under construction. A woman with silver hair pouring tea. Then schematics. Senate defense outposts. Planetary shield weaknesses. Backup infrastructure blueprints. All traced with red chalk lines and little arrows. The final image was a handwritten post-it on a hull panel. "You already gave us the keys. You just forgot." The military demanded retaliation. Strike teams. Planetary scans. Drone bombardments. But there was nothing to strike. Earth's official communications remained offline. Its colony silent. Every attempt to trace the origin of the incursions ended in loops, feedback traps that mocked their efforts. A search AI designed by the Galdrani fleet spontaneously composed a limerick. You looked for the door, but it's under the floor. The wolves are all in, and wearing your skin. So knock if you want to be more. The AI shut down immediately after. Permanently. In an isolated corner of Vostok Null, Baba Yaga leaned over a console and surveyed a battlefield where no weapons had fired. Markets collapsing from false predictions. Supply chains severed by mistrust. Defense pacts broken because of falsified messages sent from official Senate channels, created years ago and buried until just the right moment. It had taken decades, hundreds of subtle moves, countless acts of smiling patience. Sasha stepped into view. They're activating emergency power consolidation protocols. They're consolidating into a single throat. Do we cut it? She turned. Not yet. He frowned. Why? Because they still think there's a way out. She walked over to a cupboard, pulled out a jar labeled cloves, and added a pinch to the kettle. Let them try to negotiate with the smoke. A summit was called. Not a public one. An emergency, unrecorded session in the deep halls of the neutral zone. Only 8 species attended. The rest were either too proud, too afraid, or too broken to respond. Chair Varix stood at the head of the table. This is not a war of ships. This is not a war of guns. He gestured to a screen showing more collapses. Systems failing, rebellion starting, entire sectors in blackout. This is war of narrative. And we've already lost the first act. A Trelshry commander bared her teeth. Then what's the plan? Submit. No, Varix said. We flipped the script. He reached into a briefcase and placed a sealed folder on the table. I'm authorizing Operation Backdraft. The room went still. You said we'd never use that, someone whispered. I lied, Varix said. Like a human. That night, as a coded packet zipped through forbidden channels, Sasha received the signal. Baba Yaga sipped her tea and smiled. They're going to try something desperate. Yes, Sasha said. A covert fleet. 20 vessels. Disavowed. Disguised. Headed to Luna Base. They won't find it. They know it's there. They know nothing, she replied. Outside, a dozen lights flickered on the black horizon, satellites blinking in a pattern. I'm ready, Sasha said. She nodded. Then let's open the final curtain. 20 ships arrived at Luna Base. What they found was not a base. It was a grave. The hollow husk of an old Earth mining colony. Empty. Decommissioned. Left as bait. Each ship received the same broadcast, personalized to its species, playing in their native language. A child's voice reciting, Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Then the stars blinked off. The Senate fleet vanished from sensors. A moment later, every ship's navigational AI shut down with a cheerful Earth voice saying, Thank you for participating in the trial version of freedom. Your demo has expired. Chair Varix received the news in silence. He didn't speak. He didn't scream. He opened a drawer and pulled out the gingerbread recipe. He read it again. He wept. At Vostok Null, Baba Yaga leaned back and closed her eyes. The galaxy was unraveling in exactly the right order. Piece by piece. T by T. They thought they were watching a rebellion. They didn't realize they were watching a play. The audience just hadn't realized yet they were also part of the cast. It was quiet in the Senate. Not the usual administrative quiet of bureaucracy suffocating under its own protocol, but the silence of something enormous winding down, like the final spin of a dying machine. The Great Hall stood half-lit. Only 67 of the usual 400 delegates remained. Dozens of seats were simply dark, their representatives either dead, fled, or too terrified to log in. Chair Varix stood at the center, his eyes bloodshot, his uniform wrinkled and unpressed. The last few weeks had stripped him of illusion. His hands trembled at the podium, but his voice, when it came, was clear. We are gathered not to restore control, he said, slowly scanning the room, but to acknowledge its loss. He let the words sit. No one interrupted. In every quadrant, order has collapsed. Supply lines destroyed. Trust dissolved. Even the concept of authority has degraded. Our satellites were not sabotaged. Our fleets were not destroyed in combat. We were not conquered by force. He looked down at a small piece of paper he'd kept tucked in his pocket, creased and coffee-stained. They beat us with timing, with irony, with tea. One of the delegates scoffed quietly. Varix didn't even glance at him. We misunderstood the nature of war. We assumed it was a matter of power, scale, weapons. But we invited a species to this chamber that doesn't fight like we do. They study, they smile, and they wait for everyone else to go blind before they move. A long pause. They're not soldiers. They're narrators. The Valari scribe stepped forward then, the last of her kind present. She placed something at the foot of the central podium. A teacup. Porcelain. Cracked. Varix stepped back. From the rear of the chamber, the main door opened with a soft hiss. She entered. Baba Yaga. She did not wear armor. She did not bring guards. She did not carry weapons. She brought herself, and that was enough. Her hair was pinned back with an iron comb. Her coat was black. Her steps were slow, like someone who had already won and had no need to hurry. Varix didn't try to stop her. He only watched as she ascended the stairs, her eyes sweeping the room, pausing for a moment at every darkened seat. She reached the platform and stood beside him. No speech, no greeting, just a presence as heavy as gravity. Why now? Varix asked her quietly. Why reveal yourself now? Her voice was calm. Because this was the plan. You wanted the Senate to collapse? I needed it too. Varix's voice cracked. Why? What do humans want? Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something there that chilled him more than hate. Disappointment. You built peace on power, she said. But peace built on power is always temporary. It's just silence with a timer. He swallowed. So you destroyed the timer? No, she said. We moved it into a different room. He stared at her, confused. She looked around again, then raised her voice, soft but deliberate. It carried. Every alliance, every trade route, every treaty was based on coercion. Fear of stronger fleets, stronger walls. It worked for millennia. But humans, we are a people born from betrayal. We remember the feel of shackles. We remember promises broken over ink and steel. So we built something else. She raised a hand. A holographic map unfurled in the air above her. The galaxy shimmered in gold. Then, sector by sector, colors shifted. Blue threads knitting themselves across zones that had once belonged to the most powerful empires. Not occupation, she said. Consensus. Voluntary withdrawal from the Senate. And every world that steps away, steps into something new. Varix's throat tightened. A new Senate. A council, she corrected. Not ruled by force. Governed by contribution. You mean ruled by humans? No, she said gently. Guided by the only ones who still remember what happens when you mock the storm while it's still circling your campfire. The room pulsed with something that could not be named. Not tension. Not fear. Truth. You could have just asked us to change, Varix said. We did, she said. For 91 cycles. The silence stretched. Then softly she added, but it is not your fault alone. You only made the mistake of believing we were what we appeared to be. That was our doing. He looked at her, as if for the first time. You were never the witch. She smiled. No, I was the story. Behind them, the main screen activated. Dozens of systems across the Senate banner, now lit in different hues. Formerly feuding species were exchanging aid. Formerly oppressed colonies were holding open elections. Without oversight, without fear. A new framework had emerged. Decentralized. Mutually accountable. And led not by humans, but by those humans had once quietly mentored. Varix watched the display. It didn't make sense. It felt like healing. Without violence. Without military rule. Just redirection. He turned to her, barely a whisper. What was your mission, really? She looked at him and set a small folded page on the podium. He opened it. It was the vote tally. The original Senate vote. The one that had revoked Earth's membership. I don't understand, he said. This wasn't rigged. No, she said. But we did encourage it. You wanted us to expel you? Yes. Because we couldn't fix the system from within. It had to collapse from the top. Varix stepped back. You orchestrated your own exile. We orchestrated your arrogance. The weight of it hit like gravity. All this war, it wasn't retaliation. No, she said. It was theater. He slumped slightly. And the final act. She tilted her head, almost amused. You're standing in it. There was a moment, a breath where the universe tilted. Then the Valari scribe stepped forward and placed a hand on Varrix's shoulder. Not a gesture of dominance. One of empathy. It is not a defeat, she said. It is a reformation. The other delegates looked to each other. Some nodded. Some wept. Some simply watched, their eyes wide, as if they had just woken up after a very long dream. Varrix closed the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it in his pocket. Then what do we do now, he asked. Baba Yaga looked toward the skylight above the chamber, where distant stars blinked like candle flames. Now, she said, we tell a new story. And with that, she turned and walked back down the steps, past the empty seats, past the delegates still frozen in thought. At the door, she paused. And without turning around, she added, remember the tale of the witch in the woods? The one everyone feared, until they realized she was only dangerous to those who ignored the signs. She looked over her shoulder, a smile like a horizon. Earth is the woods. The doors slid closed behind her. And for the first time in the history of the Galactic Senate, the chamber didn't echo with applause, protest, or panic. Only understanding, the kind that arrives too late, but still in time.